with his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning. It's time for Johnnie Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnnie Walker Dread Show.
After breaking with Pierce, the Rittenhouses left Indiana. In April, I met them at their new place, whose location I agreed not to disclose. My request for an interview had repeatedly been refused, but Hancock had facilitated a meeting. There were substantial restrictions. The Rittenhouses would answer questions about their family history and about such figures as Pierce, but, as is common with homicide defendants, we could not directly discuss the case.
Yes. And I'm glad that Paige said that this was common. She's not really crying and bitching about it. That's good.
When the Rittenhouses fled Antioch, they abandoned most of their possessions. Donors re-outfitted them. Their current place had a new sectional sofa, a Keurig coffee maker, and bed linens from Walmart.
Okay. Not sure why that's important, but okay.
Each family member had a bedroom. All three siblings, including Faith, who is 20, were back in high school, online, and using new computers that Hancock had provided.
You know, it's unfortunate because I'm sure that both the girls would like to be in a regular school. They can't.
Before I arrived, Wendy set out platters of deli meats and made a dip of cream cheese and canned chili. Rittenhouse was in his room, but Wendy took me to meet him briefly. He had on a dark blue hoodie and black Lululemon slacks. Behind him were PlayStation controls and a desktop computer. He had been researching where to apply to college and said that he hoped to go into pediatric nursing.
Oh man, all the leftists out there. Oh my God, he's going to be a nurse. No, I'm not going to let him anywhere near me or my family. As if like he's some sort of serial killer or something like that. Look, if you're in a hospital and Kyle Rittenhouse shows up, just don't ambush him. Don't chase him and you'll be fine. Okay? It's really not that hard.
He later explained, seeing how my mom and her co-workers work with their patients and how they treat their families, those people are having the worst day of their lives, and they need somebody to fall onto and rely on.
Would have been nice to hear that a little bit earlier in the article. But that's a really nice thing to say. And I'm glad she printed it. I mean, she could have deleted that.
That's something I want to do. In the den, Wendy and Faith sat together on the sofa, and Hancock perched at one end. The family clearly hoped to distance themselves from some of the people who had surrounded them. Wendy said of the Rittenhouse's decision to break with Pierce, Kyle was John's ticket out of debt. She was pressing Pierce to return $40,000 in donated living expenses that she believed belonged to the family, and told me that Pierce had refused. He said we owed him millions. He freed Kyle.
Yeah, well, you're dealing with a lawyer. I wish you luck.
The Rittenhouses, with considerable input from Hancock, described Kyle as selfless. He has this nature to protect people, and ideologically open-minded. Huge Andrew Yang fan. The Rittenhouses did not see themselves as particularly political.
Huge Andrew Yang fan. That's kind of interesting. I had not heard that before, and so one of the things that comes out of the New Yorker article are some of these tidbits that kind of surprise you. Is it possible for somebody to be a huge Andrew Yang fan and a huge Trump fan? I'm not sure. I don't know how you coalesce those two. And by the way, the description they made of Kyle seems to jive with pretty much what we know about him. He's the community volunteer type. He grew up really poor, and quite often when you grow up really poor, you're always going to be looking for something to grant you affirmation from others. And one of the things that these people often do is that they start doing a lot of community volunteer work. And so they post the photos of them, doing car washes for charity, and people come in and they say, great job. And boy, it sure is good to have people like you in our community. They like that. When you grow up poor, you're looking for self-esteem wherever you can find it. And it's certainly a hell of a lot healthier than some of the things that some of these people do when growing up poor.
But Faith considered herself an ardent advocate of Black Lives Matter. I was told that Kyle liked Trump because Trump liked the police. They insisted that Kyle was not racist and made a point of explaining that the Rittenhouses have black relatives. The whole family agreed that the Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin had murdered George Floyd, and Faith said that she had attended a march protesting the killing.
Doesn't sound like a real white supremacist family, does it?
She had actively disapproved of her brother's support of Trump, especially given Trump's misogyny, but said that Rittenhouse knew how to respect women. I raised an obvious discrepancy, the punching incident.
That's not a discrepancy, okay? For it to be a discrepancy, you have to come to a judgment of some sort. We don't know what the fight was about. We don't know who was at fault. And we don't know what really happened.
Wendy said, I told Kyle, never hit a girl. I also told Kyle, always defend your sisters.
Yeah, Binger is going to try to make hay out of this. I don't think the judge is going to let him, but if he does, I'd put the sister up on the stand and say, tell us about the times that your brother defended you, and the jury will eat that up.
The Rittenhouses told me that Kyle used to travel with a combat-grade tourniquet tucked in his boot, and that he had distributed tourniquets to his family. When I asked what he had kept in the first aid kits, Hancock called him out of his bedroom, and Rittenhouse instantly provided a list. Airway kits, tourniquets, quick-clot hemostatic gauze, gloves, splints, bandages, cotton swabs, tweezers, CPR masks, not the cheap ones. His determination to appear prepared, or strong, suggested an adolescent's need to prove himself.
Wait, how about just wanting to be professional? Or taking his role seriously? What's wrong with that? Why do we have to psychoanalyze him in the worst possible way? He wants to help people. Therefore, he carries a med kit. He takes it seriously. And so he puts things in the med kit that are really important, and he knows what they are. Is there something wrong with that? Because the last time I looked, that was perfectly acceptable. But no, we can't describe it that way. Instead, well, this just shows you how bad he is. That's what she's kind of saying here. Oh, don't be fooled by the fact that he has these med kits and all this good stuff in there to help people. No, there has to be an ulterior motive here. And that's what she's claiming.
At the Antioch police station, he had said, I'm not a child anymore.
He wasn't talking about the medical kit at that time. He was talking about the whole shooting incident. And so you're conflating two different events to try to make it look like Kyle had delusions of grandeur.
The night of the shootings, Wendy had a bad feeling and called Rittenhouse. I'm doing medical, he told her. The gunfire started moments later. That day, I felt a part of me die, Wendy told me. Faith said, because Kyle had to defend himself, and if he didn't, he would have died? Wendy said, yeah. She started to cry. He didn't want to kill them.
Yeah, and I believe her.
Faith overtly acknowledged the deaths. I'm sorry to the families. We all are sorry, she said, adding, we think about it a lot. Wendy remained stuck on the idea that if Kyle didn't have that gun, he'd be dead. She seemed unwilling to grasp that if a bunch of civilians hadn't been carrying rifles that night, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
We wouldn't. Kyle would have been assaulted and no one would have cared. Paige Williams here is making a claim. She is claiming that it was Kyle's rifle that caused the whole thing, and she's going to try to support that claim here real shortly. But there's no evidence of that. There is no evidence whatsoever that Jojo Rosenbaum attacked Kyle because of the rifle. But she's going to make that connection because she ultimately wants to blame Kyle for the whole thing, and his carrying of the rifle, in her view, is what triggered all of the violence. But there is no justification for it. It's just an assumption. and assumptions have gotten us into nothing but trouble throughout this entire Kenosha shooting saga.
In 2017, Dwayne Dixon, an anthropologist at the University of North Carolina, heard about an upcoming Ku Klux Klan rally in Durham.
Oh, we got to get the Klan in here involved as well. Oh, we got to get the Klan involved. Got to get them mentioned somehow.
He showed up to counter-protest with a semi-automatic rifle. Dixon belonged to Redneck Revolt, whose members believed in arming themselves in self-defense against white supremacists.
Okay, do you have a problem with that, Paige?
The rally never materialized, but the sheriff's department charged Dixon with 2 misdemeanors: going armed to the terror of the people and carrying a weapon to a demonstration. There was precedent. In 1968, during the Civil Rights Movement, the North Carolina Supreme Court had upheld the need for restricting loaded weapons, noting, "In this day of social upheaval, one can perceive only dimly the tragic consequences to the people if either night riders or daytime demonstrators, fanatically convinced of the righteousness of their cause, could legally arm themselves."
Yeah, I don't care about this. You know why? Wisconsin has its own statutes. It has its own laws. I don't give a damn what North Carolina says. Another thing about it is, keep in mind, North Carolina is an any provocation state. That's much different than Wisconsin, which is a straight provocation state. They don't have the same views towards the carrying of rifles and whether that provokes violence or not. Different states, Paige. Come on.
Public safety was jeopardized when firearms were ready to be used on every outbreak of ungovernable passion. But times had changed. The first of Dixon's charges was dropped, and a judge ultimately dismissed the count of carrying a weapon, citing Dixon's First Amendment and Second Amendment rights.
Aw, that's too bad for you, Paige. You thought you had a good point here, but you really didn't. In the end, it turns out that the judge threw this thing out anyway. So what was the point of all this?
After arresting Dixon, the sheriff had declared that he could not ignore the inherent danger that comes with untrained individuals operating as a self-appointed security force in our streets. The climate has only worsened since then.
I don't care what the sheriff says. It's a sheriff in North Carolina. You might as well get Andy Taylor, get his opinions. Has about the same amount of credibility.
The Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence recently began compiling a list of demonstrations that attract visibly armed protesters or counter-protesters. Throughout 2020 and early 2021, there were more than 60 such events in 24 states and in Washington, D.C.
Confirmation bias plays a really big role in such listings.
Many state laws supersede city ordinances, making it impossible for cities and towns, even those with rising gun violence, to set constraints on guns. Not long ago, officials in Boulder, Colorado banned assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, but in March, a judge blocked the ban, saying that the local government had no control over the extent to which people can be armed in public.
That's right. Yep, you got it. That's the way it's supposed to be. People have rights, and cities can't take away their rights. Too bad, but that's the way it is.
10 days after the judge intervened, a shooter killed 10 people at a Boulder grocery store. In May, Washington state banned civilians from openly carrying firearms at permitted demonstrations. The ban's primary sponsor, Patty Kuderer, has said, "The purpose of bringing a weapon to a public demonstration is not to protect yourself, it's to intimidate." Other states, however, are moving in the opposite direction. Texas, later this year, will allow people to carry handguns without a permit, and in California, there are new legal challenges to long-standing bans on AR-15-style weapons and large-capacity magazines. The availability of guns correlates with gun violence.
Okay, so now we're going to go into a gun control argument. They just can't resist it. They have to get into gun control. And like all gun control proponents, she's going to screw up constantly here.
During the 10 years of the federal ban on assault weapons, 1994 to 2004, the number of mass shooting events diminished. Last year, the U.S. broke records for gun sales and reached the highest level of gun homicides in decades. 30 states have adopted stand your ground laws, further institutionalizing civilian use of lethal force. Robin Thomas, the Giffords Law Center's executive director,
And a person who knows very little about self-defense and guns, actually,
told me that such laws urgently need to be repealed because, among other things, they distort the notion of civic responsibility.
Okay, so now we're going to present a pro-gun control argument here. And is there an opposing view presented here? No, this is not a fair treatment. This is a biased article. She's playing to the crowd. She knows her readers. They're liberals. And so she's making a pitch for gun control in this article.
You have this misconception of a hero with a gun being the answer to public safety, when it's exactly the opposite.
Yeah, we should rely on the police. Oh, wait, I thought that the police were the bad people. I thought that the protesters were out there because of the police brutality issue in the first place. So what is the answer? Should we call the police? Or should we take care of things ourselves? Or should we just roll over like lambs? And I think that's what the option is that you're looking for.
Armed civilians assume that they are doing good, partly because the system propagates that mythology by passing laws that allow for it.
Yeah, okay, so let's go to Kenosha. That first night, there weren't a lot of armed guards there. And what happened? A whole bunch of businesses got burned down. That's your solution? And the answer is, yeah, that's what she wants. That's what they all want. They basically want us to stay in our homes and let the crowd go into the streets and tear the hell out of things. It's a way to destroy society. The police aren't going to stop it. The firefighters aren't going to stop it. Who's going to stop it? Well, people like Kyle decided they would take up that responsibility. Good for them. Good for them. I have no problem with it. You know what? If the police go in there and they put a stop to this crap, then we might have a different story here.
In Wisconsin, determining if someone acted in self-defense involves the question of who initiated the aggression. But as in many states, there is no clear definition of provocation. As John D. Moore explained in a 2013 article in the Brooklyn Law Review, in some parts of the country, a person forfeits the privilege of self-defense merely by having shown up at a foreseeably dangerous situation. Moore argued that the varying standards make it harder for citizens to fairly distinguish between the vigilant and the vigilante.
One thing she doesn't mention are the other kinds of states. She only mentions the one where it makes Kyle look like he's guilty. But Wisconsin is not one of those states. What she was describing is an any provocation state, but Wisconsin is not an any provocation state. So I bring that one up because she's trying to plant the seed in people's minds that Kyle ultimately is guilty here because he showed up with a rifle in a potentially volatile situation. The truth of it is, though, that's not what the law says in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin's law favors someone who, in good faith, withdraws from the fight, yet there is not always a duty to retreat. At Rittenhouse's trial, which is scheduled to begin on November 1st, the jury may need to find only that when he pulled the trigger, he reasonably feared death or great bodily harm.
Yeah, and I think that most people would say, yeah, he certainly did. Oh, I don't think that he was facing any serious bodily harm. Oh, okay. Would you like to be in a situation? Well, no. I mean, kind of dangerous. Yeah, exactly.
Many people in Wisconsin expect the jury to determine that the DA overreached when he imposed the charge of intentional homicide.
Oh, he definitely did.
Yet Rittenhouse could still go to prison if jurors hold him accountable for the deaths.
Of course, that's true in every trial. It doesn't even matter how innocent the person is. The jury could always find the person guilty. Okay, yeah, we get that. The jury just might decide to ignore all the evidence. The jury might decide to ignore what the statutes say and just convict him anyway. Sure, that's always true.
The Harvard law professor Noah Feldman recently wrote that though Rittenhouse presumably will claim that he feared having his gun wrested away and used against him, it's only the presence of Rittenhouse's own weapon that gives him the opportunity to claim that he was in fear of bodily harm.
So, if somebody's going to try to take my car from me and run me over with it, then I would be able to fight that person, I would think. The very fact that he was going to use my own car against me doesn't dispel anything. There's nothing inconsistent about that. There is nothing illogical about it. Well, maybe to people like Noah Feldman. Actually, Noah Feldman is not a stupid man. He's actually quite ingenious. But he has no understanding of self-defense laws. He has no understanding of guns.
Thomas told me that if Rittenhouse hadn't concluded that it was his responsibility to venture, armed, into a hot environment, he wouldn't have been in harm's way, and he certainly wouldn't have hurt anyone else.
You don't know that. He wouldn't have been in harm's way? How do you know? Again, Paige Williams is trying to make the claim that this was all about Kyle's rifle, that it was the rifle that caused Joseph Rosenbaum to attack him. But there's no evidence of that. We don't know why Joseph Rosenbaum chose to attack Kyle. So why are you making the assumption that it was about the rifle?
In a recent hearing, Bruce Schroeder, the judge who will preside over Rittenhouse's trial, stressed the importance of sticking to the facts and the evidence. He demanded a trial that's fair to the defendant, which is his constitutional guarantee, and to the public, which is my responsibility.
And that will probably bother the hell out of you, Paige, when it comes down to it, because the law is on Kyle's side on this.
But thanks to the opportunists who have seized on the Rittenhouse drama, the case has been framed as the broadest possible referendum on the Second Amendment.
Oh, I see what we're doing here. Okay, Judge Bruce Schroeder wants a fair trial, but there may not be a fair trial because of the right wing. The right wing might come in and make this thing into a spectacle. Nothing to say about the left. As if the left would never do anything to harm the ability for somebody to get a fair trial. Oh, no. It's always those right-wingers that are doing this.
No other legal case presents such a vivid metaphor for the country's polarization. Many of Rittenhouse's supporters have described the shootings almost in cathartic terms, as if they were glad that he killed people.
Yeah, what about the left? How is the left describing it? You don't mention that.
If a jury appears to sanction vigilantism, it seems likely that more altercations between protesters and counter-protesters will turn deadly.
So if Kyle is acquitted, then this is an affirmation of vigilantism. How many of you out there thought that this was a fair, unbiased article? Really? Think about it. If Kyle is exonerated, she's going to be the first to go in there and talk about this being the mark of the destruction of democracy.
Thomas sees the case as a bellwether, putting guns at the forefront of the stability of our democracy.
Yep. See what I mean? Paige Williams thinks Kyle is guilty. Paige Williams wants him convicted. Let there be no mistake about it.
Protecting citizen safety is a primary function of our government, she said.
Yeah, but they're not doing it. If they're not doing it, then who does it?
Yet it's gotten to the point where this idea that you have a right to carry a loaded weapon is starting to literally overtake other rights. The right to express your vote, the right to assemble without fear.
There is no such right. There's no such right as the right to assemble without fear. I will have another video coming out about Noah Feldman and Robin Thomas to show you just the kind of people that she's bringing into the fold here. They're not evil people, but they're ignorant. They don't understand the situation at all. Noah Feldman, especially, although he's a gifted legal scholar, doesn't have any understanding of Second Amendment rights, and he doesn't have any understanding of self-defense laws. Robin Thomas, her background is almost purely in civil matters. In my next video, I'll summarize my overall view of Paige Williams and her article. It's not going to be pleasant for her, although I doubt she cares. But let's not confuse this with an even-handed treatment, guys. Come on. This was a hit piece. It was designed to make a claim that Kyle ultimately is guilty, although he might get off on a technicality, and that technicality shows the problems with our American justice system. Like my video, subscribe to my channel.